Barrows is a great starting point for those who want to get into PvM, with its bountiful amount of drops that can provide players with great starting gear. In this guide we'll be covering what useful add-ons you should be using, how to get there, the recommended stats, gear and inventory setups, and a full boss rundown. As always, I'll be timestamping the guide in the description as well as on screen now for your convenience.
First plugin I would recommend installing to RuneLite is the Barrows Brothers plugin. This plugin will tell you which hill is which Barrows brother and which one you have and haven't killed. It will also inform you of the percentage rate so that you can maximise your loot from the chest, but we'll go into the percentage rate later on in the video. It will also tell you about the puzzle on each door leading to the main chest room and how to solve it. And also it'll give you a prayer drain timer which will tell you when Barrows is going to drain your prayer so you can prepare accordingly during your fight. Second plugin that I recommend downloading is the Ground Markers plugin. Although it's not essential for Barrows, it's still very useful as you can still mark a tile on the floor and label it as you want, and it's great for the underground section of Barrows as you can mark a tile against a ladder and safe spot a Barrows brother. Tile Indicator is also a great plugin to install because it will highlight the tile you have clicked, which will indicate your destination tile, which can be very useful for when you are trying to complete some of the combat achievements in Barrow. The final plugin that I'd recommend installing is the Boost Information plugin. This will tell you what boosts you currently have active and the duration of them boosts. For example, if you're using an imbued heart to increase your magic attack, it will tell you how long the magic attack boost lasts for and how long until you can use the imbued heart again.
Now we're going to cover how to get to Barrows. There are several different routes which you can find on the Old School RuneScape wiki website. However, we are only going to be covering the top 4 routes I feel gives the best kills per hour, with number 1 being the quickest and number 4 being the slowest. The first being the Barrows teleportation tab. The Barrows tab will teleport you outside of the Barrows and all you need to do is run south. This is the most efficient method but is the most expensive. You'll need 83 magic and at least 60% Arceus favour in order to use this tablet or in the Arceus spellbook. To save runes you can alternatively place a portal in your POH or portal chamber room or even the Portal Nexus. The second route is using the Shades of Morton teleportation scroll, which will teleport you west of Barrows and then all you need to do is run east. The third most efficient route is to unlock the Mauritania Legs 3, which will give you unlimited teleports to Berg de Rot. Then you need to run north to Morton and then east to Barrows. I personally use this method until I unlock the requirements to use the Barrows tabs or the portal in my POH. However, the diary requirements may take you a little bit longer to grind out before going to Barrows. The fourth route is the most free method, however it does take a little bit longer. You'll need to use a fairy ring and use the code BKR to teleport to the swamp, then run southeast to the swampy boat, which then takes you to east of Morton, and then run east to Barrows. This route will require you to partially complete a quest, which we'll come to in a minute. So you'll need to complete the Priest in Peril quest to gain access to Barrows and the swamps area, and also partially complete the Fairy Tale 2 Cure a Queen quest. This will allow you to gain access to the fairy rings if you decide to take one of the routes that involves a fairy ring. Let's talk about some of the recommended stats for Barrows. You'll need at least 50 HP as Darek can hit very high when he's low HP. My advice is to go to him first to ensure that you have prayer, and as long as you have overhead prayers activated, he won't hit you at low HP. The higher the HP, the better the chance of survival if you run out of prayer. Next, I'd at least recommend 62 magic so that you can use the Warp Scepter. You can go to Barrows with at least 50 magic if you intend to use the Iron Blast or the Slayer Staff E, however I wouldn't recommend it as the cost to run these staffs are more expensive. I'd also recommend at least 50 range so that you can use a magic shortbow to defeat Arims with range, and also at least 50 attack so you can equip the Iron Staff if that is your weapon of choice, and thereafter I'd recommend 60 attack for the use of a Dragon Dagger special on either Arims or Carols. I'd also recommend 70 strength for a decent max hit, 60 defense so that you can have some defense stats if you run out of prayer to tank a hit, and also at least 43 prayer for overhead prayers. Some optional skills that I would recommend getting if you've got the money or you've got the time to level it up is construction. Construction, you can build portals in the POH to get to Barrows faster and to create a fairy ring and a rejuvenation pool for a fast reset. I'd also recommend at least getting 50 Slayer, which can depend on the weapon you use, but if you decide to use a Slayer Staff E for example, you'll need 50 Slayer, or if you use the Trident, you'll need 87 Slayer, However, I understand that not everyone's an Ironman like myself, so if you've got access to the GE, then this requirement will not be essential. So let's talk about some of the items that you need to consider before you gear and set up your inventory, as there are a couple options that are great for getting to and from Barrows. The budget option I would recommend is the Ardy Cloak and the Ring of Dueling. The Ring of Dueling allows you to teleport to the Ferox Enclave to reset your stats and HP and prayer, and then using the Ardy Cloak to teleport back to the monastery to then run northeast to the Tower of Life and use the Fairy Ring. The expensive option, you can use house tabs to teleport to your POH and use your rejuvenation pool and then the Fairy Ring to teleport back to Barrows, or using a Barrows portal to get back to Barrows. One item that I believe is key, and only very recently since combat achievements have come out, is the Gommel Hilt. If you get the Gommel Hilt 2 from the combat achievements, you won't lose any prayer at Bandos once you've worn it, meaning that you can do more runs without teleporting out and more inventory spots for food or gear swaps instead of prayer potions. So let's talk about some of the gear and inventory setups. First setup I'm going to look at is the low level. The items that you'll need to be equipping for Barrows is Helms of Nizanot, Ava's Accumulator, Amulet of Glory, the Rune Arrows, Warp Scepter, a Gommel's Hilt, a Fighter Torso, Rune Plate Legs. If you can upgrade to Dragon Plate Legs, that's great. Barrows Gloves, Dragon's Boots. If you can't afford Dragon's Boots or you're an Ironman and you haven't got access to them, then use Rune Boots or Climbing Boots. And a Ring of Dueling. In the inventory, I'll be taking an MSB Imbued, a Rune Kite Shield, Black D-Hide, or any less D-Hide if you haven't got 70 range, Dragon Scimitar, and a DDP. If you're not going to be using the Warp Scepter, Iban's Blast through the Iban Staff upgraded, and the Slayer Staff Enchanted, which is the Magic Dart, which requires 50 Slayer, are great alternatives. However, I wouldn't recommend them as they can be more expensive to cast than a Warp Scepter. The Slayer Staff Enchanted is a good starting item, but once again not as effective as the Warp Scepter. In the inventory, I would take as many sharks as possible, but leaving a few inventory spaces for the runes in the chest. Prayer pots if you're not going to be using the Gommel, Super Attack Potion and a Super Strength Potion, a Spade, and also any teleportation tabs if you are not going to be using a Fairy Ring. The medium level setup, I would recommend taking the Helm of Nizanot, the Ava's Assembler instead of the Accumulator, an Occult's Necklace instead of the Amulet of Glory, a Rada's Blessing instead of the Rune Arrows, Trident of the Swamp, Gommel's Hilt, a Fighter Torso, Varrock's Plate Skirt instead of the Dragon Plate Legs or the Rune Plate Legs, Barrows Gloves, Dragon's Boots, and a Ring of Dueling. In the inventory, I would recommend taking a Blowpipe instead of the MSB Eye, Dragon Defender with the Abyssal Whip instead of the Dragon Scimitar, Black D-Hide, and also a DDP. If you do decide instead of using the Trident of the Swamps to use Trident of the Siege, this would be a good idea if you're trying to save on Zulrah Scales. It will charge you GP instead of Zulrah Scales to charge it up, and can be a time saver, especially if you don't have Zulrah on farm. In the inventory, I would recommend taking Sharks, as many as you can, leaving a couple of inventory spots for the runes from the chest, prayer pots if you're not going to use the Gommel, a Super Combat Potion, but if you can't afford a Super Combat Potion, take a Super Stir and a Super Attack Potion, a Spade, and also teleportation tabs to get to and from your POH if you're going to use a Barrows portal instead of the Fairy Rings. Now the last setup that we'll talk about is the high level setup. I made some drastic changes to the gear setup, as I feel that with a high level setup you're going to be wanting to do the most efficient runs as possible and get the most kills per hour. First thing to start off with is the Ancestral Hat and the Head Slot, the Imbued Saradomin Cape or any of the Imbued Capes, Occult Necklace, Rada's Blessing, Trident of the Swamp, the Elidinous Ward, Carol's Leather Top and the Carol's Leather Skirt, Cemented Bracelet, Pegasus Boots, and the Altar Ring. Now if you can't afford the Elidinous Ward, you can use the Gommel Hilt instead for no prayer drain. In the inventory we've gone with the Sharks, and filling up as many as you can, leaving a few spots for the runes from the chest again. Prayer pots if you're not going to use the Gommel, a Super Combat, a Spade, the Ava's Assembler, the Anguish, the Abyssal Whip and the Dragon Defender, the Dragon Claws instead of the DDP for a spec weapon, house tabs, the Gommel Hilt and a Toxic Blowpipe. Now this setup will give you a nice variation for all the Barrows brothers and will give you a very quick turnover when it comes to kills per hour. So before we head into a Barrows run, here's some information that might help you on your journey. In the top left hand corner there is a cheat sheet that will tell you the attack styles that you should be using against the Barrows brothers and their vulnerabilities. My advice would be to use range on Arams, and on Carols I would use melee. So it's probably advised to bring all 3 attack styles when going against the Barrows brothers. Verax has a 25% chance to hit through prayer, however it's still worth using protect from melee. So just bear that in mind when you're going against Verax. If you do get hit, take some food, you will be fine. So in the bottom left hand corner is a sheet that will tell you which Barrows brother has been killed and has not been killed. The tick symbolises that the boss has been killed against their name, and the X symbolises it's not been killed against the name. The potential percentage is basically the percentage or chance that you will get an item. I would ensure to cap your potential reward to ensure that you get the most runes and that you get the best chance at an item. The best way to do this is making sure that you kill all 6 Barrows brothers and ensuring that you kill 2 skeletons and 1 bloodworm. This will total to a potential of 86.8%. Going over this will mean that you'll get less runes and less chance at an item. So once you've killed the 5 brothers above ground and you head down into the sarcophagus, if you are in a room with a ladder, you can actually force spawn the Barrows brother and safe spot him behind the ladder. This is especially useful if you're running out of prayer or food. So the last thing to mention when you're in the sarcophagus underground rooms is that you should be paying attention to which doors you can actually go through. The dark brown doors you won't be able to go through, but the light grey doors you will be able to go through. When you go to the chest room, you'll be presented with a pattern to solve. Make sure you click the relevant pattern that has got a green box around it. The Barrows plugin really does come into its own with this, as it will allow you to quickly enter, because if you are in combat, chances are the screen will go off. So now you've got all this information, let's get into a full boss run. So as we're coming to the end of this Barrows run here, I really do hope that this guide has helped you in getting started on your run. I wish you the best of luck in getting all the items that you want. If you have enjoyed the video, please drop it a like and please do consider subscribing so you never miss any of our content and our guides. I hope to see you in the next video, guys. Thank you very much for watching and see you soon.